Are they going to? Are you guys going to? Are they going to? In 30 seconds, where these people are going to? What?
Why is Rena's?
No.
Oh no, it's fine. Never mind.
Oh, okay.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The protea leaves us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Good afternoon and welcome to Parliament TV, and we are coming to you live from our beautiful studio on the parliamentary precincts. I am Sibulelo Mvulane, and joining me for this afternoon's program is my colleague Thembinkosi Ngoma.
Thank you, Sibulelo. Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Parliament's coverage of the Budget Speech 2022. This afternoon at 2 p.m., Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will deliver his maiden budget speech. You will remember the minister occupied this position in August 2021 following the resignation of former Minister Tito Mboweni.
Indeed, Thembinkosi. It's actually very interesting that we are yet to have a female Minister of Finance since the dawn of our democracy. But I guess that's a discussion for another day. Our focus today is on the budget speech, as the nation waits with great anticipation to hear how the budget that will be tabled a little bit later this afternoon will impact their lives positively. The President outlined government's program of action for the year ahead, which must now be followed by the appropriate budget allocation for implementation.
Absolutely, Sibulelo. February is a busy month for Parliament. On the 10th February, President Cyril Ramaphosa outlined the plan of action for 2022, which was debated the following week. And today, the Minister of Finance will tell the nation how much will be needed to ensure that the plan of action is realized. He will also be updating Parliament about the progress on the medium-term budget policy statement, which he delivered in October 2021. But before the Minister delivers his speech, we have put together an informative lineup to give you a better understanding of the significance of the budget speech and the budget process.
Absolutely, Thembinkosi. We will be talking to all the relevant role players that are part of the budget process, who do oversight as well. So do stay tuned, as we do have a lot more in store for you.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Have your say. The Standing Committee on Finance and the Select Committee on Finance invites stakeholders and interested parties to submit written submissions on the Fiscal Framework and Revenue proposals that will be tabled together with the 2022-2023 budget on Wednesday, 23 February 2022. The Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act number 9 of 2009, defines the fiscal framework as follows. The framework for a specific financial year that gives effect to the National Executive's macroeconomic policy and includes estimates of all expenditure, budgetary and extra budgetary, specified separately for that financial year, estimates borrowing for that financial year, estimates of interest and debt servicing charges, an indication of the contingency reserve necessary for an appropriate response to emergencies or other temporary needs, and other factors based on similar objective criteria. Those who want to make submissions at public hearings on Wednesday, 2 March 2022 should specifically request this. Submissions and your indications to make an oral presentation must be received by no later than 12 o'clock on Monday, 28 February 2022. For more information, visit our website at www.parliament.gov.za. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
On Wednesday, the 23rd of February at 2 p.m., the National Assembly will host the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, who will deliver Budget Speech 2022. Through Budget Speech, the Minister will update the nation on the state of the economy, public finances, and progress made on the government's objectives in terms of service delivery. The budget is also there to fund commitments made in the State of the Nation address for the financial year. The budget comprises of the Fiscal Framework, the Appropriation Bill, the Division of Revenue Bill, as well as related budget information. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament uses to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 23 February 2022. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Mr. Rooibos that is made from a fine boss rooibos plants, which is sourced locally in South Africa, and I'm working very closely with Cape Natural Tea Products. So I go once a month to create my very special blend, and these are the headquarters, man, where the magic takes place into packing it into these beautiful packages. We're not only job creators, we're people on the ground, so we know people's needs, and I think we are the main backbones of any economy, so we can grow. So what I'm expecting from the Minister of Finance is not only to say there's 2 billion allocated to SMEs. There should also be marketing and enable a bit of easy access, because we're sitting here, we have to go through a lot of documents, bureaucratic language that some of us do not even understand. So if it can be simplified in a manner that even the person who's buying meat out there can be registered and maybe get funding, then with those that's what I'm expecting. We're also expecting measures in which the state can work with small businesses to say, okay, in our offices we buy tea from Parliament teas, so how about we buy tea from Mavusana? Maybe 0.5% of our tea will be coming from Mavusana, and then in that way we will be able to accelerate development. I mean, we get a lot of people from all over the country saying, hey, I'm in Northwest, how can I get it? Hey, I have a lodge in Limpopo, how can I get it? So there's traveling that is needed, there's a distributor that we need that side, so it's quite a lot. So if there is a funding, we will be able to centralize everything, and then we can push one way. Based on what the president said about the SMEs, it is vital to support small upcoming businesses because they are the backbone of any other economy. I also didn't hear quite a lot of measures. How are they going to undertake? Because what is actually needed by the SMEs is more of a support than anything else. To say, okay, let us, as government, let us assist in a manner that we will allow you to supply us, or we will allow you to align with Department of Trade so you can trade. And what I'm expecting from the Minister of Finance is how are they going to allocate funds into marketing so that the funds can be easily accessible. You know, just like any brochure of any business that you can easily find. So that is what I'm expecting to say. Okay, if you have this kind of business, you need government assistance. These are the channels to follow. They just need to be simply out there for everyone to easily access them. Even if someone is buying their meat for chisanyama or whatever the reason may be.
You are still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. And today is Budget Day, as the Minister of Finance will deliver the budget speech at a hybrid sitting of the National Assembly at 2 p.m. The Finance Standing Committee is responsible for oversight on National Treasury and other statutory entities. I am now joined in studio by the Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, Mr. Joe Maswangai, to talk to us more about the functions and roles of the committees in the budget process. Good afternoon, Mr. Maswangai, and welcome to Parliament TV studios.
Good afternoon.
If you could just, you know, the Standing Committee on Finance is one of the committees that its work cut across government departments. If you could just share the role of the Standing Committee on Finance.
Thanks. In your intro, you have already summarized what the Standing Committee on Finance is all about. Because as you have correctly said, it's about playing an oversight on national treasury. The rest are details, because we have got a doctrine of separation of powers. Separation of powers means that in terms of the Westminster system of governance, we have got the three arms of government: the legislature, that's the parliament where we are. We have the executive, cabinet with administration. Then we have the judiciary. So where we are as parliament, we monitor what the executive does, because we pass laws here, but the implementation of those laws, the budget that we pass here, and a whole range of other things is done at an executive level. So it becomes our responsibility as this committee, from time to time, to get a briefing from National Treasury and the entities that fall under that Treasury Department to make sure that they do things as we have agreed in Parliament.
So what is then the difference between the Standing Committee on Finance and the Standing Committee on Appropriation, and what is the relationship between the two committees?
In terms of the budgetary processes, now that today the minister is coming here, it means at an executive level, because what will have happened is that the Minister of Finance has had a consultation processes starting from local government, because we have got three spheres of government. So the budget is going to present today is a budget for the whole country. It's not a budget for national government. It encompasses everything from Cape Town to Messina and our international missions or diplomatic missions. So he has done consultations with all the departments, nationally, provincially, and local government. So after he will have presented a budget today, tomorrow we are going to have the first meeting where he will give us the briefing in detail as to what this budget is all about. From there, we are going to conduct a public hearing as this committee to listen to the public. What is their view in regard to this budget? And then take that, put it in a report, and report it in the National Assembly. From there, then comes the Standing Committee Appropriations. Standing Committee Appropriations is responsible for actual allocation of budget to each and every 40-something departments and entities. So they deal with the actual allocation of the budget. We deal with what we call the fiscal framework. We look at the budget as a whole, generally, but they are specific to make sure that so much billions goes to health, so much billions goes to education. We don't do that as a Standing Committee on Finance.
I'm glad you also outlined the process that you
your committee will follow after the presentation of the budget speech today. But we know that today the minister is delivering the speech. People often refer to it as budget day, but we know this process starts way before today.
Yes.
So before we get to today, what is the role of the committee in this in budget processing?
On a quarterly basis, Treasury comes to us and gives us reports of what's happening in government. We get reports of expenditure patterns. We also get their annual performance plans to make sure that as the Department of Finance, they do things as it is contained in the APP. So from there, we also do oversight visits. We visit their entities, be it PIC and many others. They've got so many entities, FSCA and others. Go there where they are and monitor and see to it that even those entities do things as they would have outlined in their APPs and hold them accountable for their actions.
Earlier, you spoke briefly about the budget, about public participation when you are outlining what is going to happen after today. But how do you then make sure that this public participation is prioritized during this budget process?
Public participation is a cornerstone of constitutional democracy and participatory democracy. Because if you take decisions and you don't involve the public, they are going to disown those decisions. Because at the end, they are the beneficiaries. So you adopt a motto which says, nothing for us without us. Don't speak for us as if we can't speak for ourselves. So we make sure that when they start with the budget, they've got what they call a budget cycle. This budget that they have is decided 3 years in advance, not necessarily decided. The framework is put 3 years because government is not like running a coffee shop somewhere, a family coffee shop where it's yourself, your wife, and your 2 children. Today you buy that coffee there, tomorrow you buy another tea. No, it's an entity that works over, it's infinite because you have to decide on the lives of people. They are responsible for making sure that the pension funds of workers is safe forever. So the cycle takes much longer. So even the consultation is not a consultation just for 1 year. Today the minister is presenting a budget, but he has an idea of how the budget will look like in October when we do the MTBBS, and again next year, the same time in February. The minister knows there might be a change because either the revenue collection might go down or will go up. But he has got an idea because he has got a scientific methodology where he's able to calculate that even if the revenue goes down, collection goes down or goes up, but it will be within this range. So you do what we call a long-term planning. So they've got what they call a medium-term strategic framework. So that's what guides them in terms of putting the budget together. And as I've said, they do a consultation with SALGA, which represent municipalities, with the Ministry of Culture, which is also responsible for local government, and all national departments and entities until they reach where they are today. But we make sure that that process must be followed properly.
So I know that as the minister will be delivering his budget speech at 2 o'clock, the nation is waiting in anticipation. What are you expecting to hear from the minister when he delivers the budget?
We are at a very critical stage of democracy. Young people expect a lot. We are a country which is dominated by youth or young people and women. And if you look at those two sectors, they are the most affected in terms of unemployment in the main. There are so many young people who are unemployed. If you look at the statistics released by Stats SA Labor Force Survey, we are more than 35%, I think, by now. And more than 74% of those who are affected in that percentage is young people. And remember, when Stats SA collect data, there are those who have already given up looking for a job. And so if you can add those in terms of your survey method, the percentage will be much higher. So the 34 plus comma something percent is more of a conservative figure. But the actual figure is more than 38% if you look at all those who are economically active but have also given up looking for a job. So unemployment is quite very, very, very high. The president has spoken about many packages, and we hope that after today, departments and SOEs will look at those packages and implement them as of yesterday to create employment for young people. Broad-based black economic empowerment is very, very important. This democracy was not just a neoliberal kind of a democracy. It was to address the historical disadvantages where black people have been sidelined, marginalized. They are outside the mainstream of the economy. The economy is still white that we are talking about. It's a fact. So black people are expecting a lot. And many, many other issues. We have got challenges of COVID, which has created lots of problems in the economy and socially. So we have to rebuild the economy and make sure, because even before COVID, the economy was downgraded even by the rating agencies. So the pandemic worsened the situation. So there is high expectation from young people, from women, from black people in terms of economic empowerment. The minister is supposed to bring a bill called the Public Procurement Bill, which is going to change the public procurement regime in the country so that those sectors that I've spoken about should benefit from this economy.
And now you've mentioned some of the undertakings that were made by the president during his State of the Nation address, and we're expecting that the Minister of Finance then puts finances into those undertakings so that they can be realized. What then becomes the oversight role of the committee to ensure that what the president had announced during his State of the Nation address and the finances put into it is actually does serve that purpose, or the work gets done as per the president's undertakings?
If you look at the timing of SONA and the budget speech, it is deliberate that they come a week or two after in terms of the parliamentary program. Because the president sets the policy tone that this is the direction that the country should take. And he also does that after a thorough consultation. He meets with the Presidential Council, where he meets premiers, SALGA representing mayors, and he consults various stakeholders to arrive at a SONA. So he sets the policy tone that this is the direction that the country must take. And 2 weeks after, when the minister comes, he must make sure that he addresses those issues that the president had articulated. So when we meet tomorrow and after, we look at the SONA from the president, then we look at the budget presented by the minister and make sure that the two should be able to speak to each other. We know there's a lot of pressure on the budget. It won't be like overnight they will be able to address all those policy articulation by the president. But to a certain extent, the budget must speak to SONA. There must be no variance between the two. Otherwise, the public will have a problem. We know the budget has got serious challenges of servicing the debt. That's one other challenge, because the government owes 4 trillion to the lenders. That's a lot of money. And a year it pays almost 270 billion. That's the money that was supposed to be going to education, to health, social development, and other important aspects. But be that as it may, the budget must address the issues articulated by the president and the policy of the governing party, the ANC.
And having now said all that, if you could just then give us the significance of the budget process to Parliament's mandate.
As I've said before, Parliament has got certain responsibilities which it derives from the Constitution. First and foremost, Parliament is a legislative body. It is there to make laws. That is its primary responsibility. Second, Parliament has got a role to make sure that the public participate in the law-making exercises and other programs. Parliament should have outreach programs. It should go out there to the people and listen to them. So we talk about what we call an activist parliament. Gone are those days when you have got people just operating only within the parliamentary precinct. They don't involve the public in decision-making, enhance participatory democracy. They don't go out to the people, do constituency work, do Izimbizo and other platforms. So through all those activities, Parliament makes sure that it plays oversight role on the executive. As I've said, each parliamentary committee from here will focus on its department. The standing committee or joint standing committee on defense will be monitoring the defense department. Standing committee on social development will look at the budget, look at the programs of the social development department, make sure that they get implemented. So from here, after this, each standing committee or portfolio committee of Parliament will focus on its portfolio department that it is responsible for monitoring, to make sure that really Cabinet does as it will have promised out there to the public. As I've said, there are many challenges. So that becomes our responsibility, and then we come back and report to Parliament through debate in Parliament, reports, and other platforms that we have out there to involve the people. How people participate in parliamentary processes is through public hearings.
And lastly, it's 2 questions in one. Yet earlier, we've spoken earlier about the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that the President in March 2020 announced the national state of disaster. So following that, how has that announcement impacted on the work of the committee? And secondly, there has been a concern from the members of the public whether Parliament would be able to function following the fires that ravaged the institution at the beginning of this year. So how has the COVID-19 impacted on the work of the committee, and how has the fire also impacted on the work of the committee?
COVID-19 and the fire is a serious tragedy for Parliament and democracy. Because of COVID, it was difficult to have public hearings in the conventional way, where we have to go out and meet people at the stadium, in an open field, at a hall. There were restrictions in terms of state of disaster regulations. And so that denies ordinary people to participate in parliamentary programs. We resorted to a Zoom, what do you call this platform?
Virtual platforms, yes.
Yeah, virtual platforms. And most of our people are not in those platforms. It might be young people and some of those who can afford. Remember, data is very expensive in South Africa. So you can't be in a platform for 2 hours. How will you afford data? Because people prioritize buying bread rather than data. But that time when we used to go to the people, public participation was very effective. It has been seriously impacted. I see it with our committee. When we call for public hearings, in the main, it's the elites who participate in our public hearings. Truth be told, you can look at our roll call. And we believe that now that the situation really is getting better, we'll go back to those days where we go to the people. Go to Khayelitsha, Malamlele, Umlazi, and all over. Go to the people, they see us. People can relate with us through the television and social media. They didn't vote us in those platforms. They voted us when we were campaigning. So they want to see us coming back. So the fire, really, this is unbearable. Our offices have banned. Look now, we are crammed at a Good Hope Center. You will see this afternoon at 2. The situation will be terrible. It will be few parliamentarians, and then you must have space for media, have space for staff. Surely that is undesirable. Whosoever has banned the parliament, surely he has done a serious disservice, because there was billions worth of money that have been invested on this parliamentary precinct. And Parliament is a treasure to the people of South Africa. It's a heritage. And how are you going to rebuild this precinct? It's the money that was supposed to be going to NSFAS. Our priority is not to build parliamentary precincts. Our priority number 1 is education, followed by health, social development, and others. So we must take money from education and start building offices. Surely, I don't know whosoever thought of doing this, whether it's natural fire or somebody just, but it's the work of the police. We are parliament, we don't deal with investigations. So it has seriously affected us. You saw when the president presented SONA, there were few members, it was 300 or less. Others were doing it, that's through Zoom. And it will be like this for many years. You can't rebuild the parliamentary precinct overnight. The investment which was there at the National Assembly chamber, it was millions. The technology, the seating arrangement, it has costed government over many years, millions, to put in place that infrastructure. But I think the Speaker and the Chairperson of the NCOP, as executive authority, working together with the Department of Public Works, are working overnight to make sure that we are able to do the work of Parliament properly.
Mr. Maswanga, I thank you very much for your time and for all the insights that you've shared with our viewers. That was Mr. Joe Maswanga, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, sharing insights with the viewers at home. We are building up to the budget speech scheduled for 2 p.m. this afternoon, and we are, of course, nearing that time. But for now, you stay tuned.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
On Wednesday, the 23rd of February at 2 p.m., the National Assembly will host the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, who will deliver Budget Speech 2022. Through Budget Speech, the Minister will update the nation on the state of the economy, public finances, and progress made on the government's objectives in terms of service delivery. The budget is also there to fund commitments made in the State of the Nation address for the financial year. The budget comprises of the Fiscal Framework, the Appropriation Bill, the Division of Revenue Bill, as well as related budget information. The budget process is one of the critical instruments that Parliament uses to conduct oversight over the executive. Watch the budget speech live across Parliament's platforms from 2 p.m. on Wednesday, 23 February 2022. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
16 Lotoli Art Gallery is an art gallery run by Tulani Fesi, Bilo. It's an arts and culture art gallery which displays arts from legends from Bwalanga, like your Mongesi Kum, your Gerald Tabeta, and also a young artist, emerging artist called Tuluman Ngofeni. So it's an art gallery that houses our local artists, and it embraces the art of Lang and also embraces Lang as an art destination. For us, being in a tourism district, we are usually affected by COVID, obviously based on the closures and the non-travel that has occurred in the society, and also with us having to rely on tourism as well as locals who are jobless. Now we couldn't even get our locals to come and support our businesses. So we've had a huge impact. I think now, since the borders are being slowly opened, we've seen the difference now. It's becoming more positive, and we've been able to grow a bit. I think for us, since the inception of this program, we personally haven't relied on any outside funding. It's all been public sponsorships and other huge private funders who are able to assist us. I think for now, for us as small business owners, what we would expect at least is a plan where our black enterprises stop being called small businesses, and how do we move from small businesses to having large enterprises. I think that's the plan that we are looking for as the youth of Kwalanga, and this is what we would love to hear from the minister.
South Africa is facing an economic and financial crisis. The economy is not growing, there's unemployment at an all-time high, and government spending is more than its income and its revenue, and government's debt is ever increasing, and the cost to service that debt is unaffordable. The minister will have to take a firm stance against the inflated public wage bill. He will have to introduce actual measures to curb the wage bill, not just a lot of words, but actual action. He will also need to introduce measures to create a conducive environment for the private sector to create jobs and get the economy going. That will include tax relief and definitely no increases in any form of taxes or tariffs. That will be detrimental to the economy. It will not stimulate growth, and it will not stimulate job creation. We will have a dire effect if there's any increases in personal income tax or company tax, as it will have the opposite effect, and it will not create jobs and job creation and economic growth. We need measures and structural reforms, he will have to reaffirm what the President also said during the State of the Nation address, and he will have to give action to that. He will have to introduce measures to create that conducive environment.
Is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. On Tuesday, the 1st of June 2021, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Nimudise, and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, will table Parliament's budget vote in the National Assembly and the NCOP respectively at 2 p.m. Parliament's budget vote seeks to outline the funding of the oversight, lawmaking, public involvement and international relations program and provide account of the previous spending of the allocated budget. Watch the live build-up program on the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces debates on Vote 2 on Parliament TV from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. and across Parliament's social media platforms. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Parliament TV on DSTV, channel 408. As indicated earlier, we did say that we will be talking to some of the key role players in the budget process as we get closer to the all-important maiden budget speech by Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, a little bit later this afternoon in a hybrid sitting of the National Assembly. The importance of oversight in the current budget process cannot be overemphasized, and it must also be mentioned that there are a number of processes that take place to ensure that oversight is undertaken over the public sector and their expenditure and performance overall. Parliament is elected by the people of South Africa to represent the people, and therefore it authorizes the executive to spend, to text, and to oversee the work of the executive and their program of action on behalf of the people of South Africa. Through effective oversight of the executive, South Africa can address poverty, inequality, unemployment, which are key objectives of the National Development Plan Vision 2030. Parliament is also mandated by Section 77(3) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa of 1996, which also states that all money bills must be considered in accordance, with the procedure established by Section 75. The Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act of 2018 authorizes Parliament to amend the budget. I am now joined by the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, Mr. Fiscal Framework, who is here to talk to us about what to expect in this afternoon's budget. Dr. Framework, thank you so much for making time to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Madam. And let me also greet the viewers of Channel 408, which I think is a very important channel because it deals with matters of Parliament. That is the people of South Africa have elected to come and represent them here. So what to expect today? Perhaps one should start by saying, wish Minister Godongwana well in his maiden budget speech. These are difficult times. Indeed. And it needs to do a lot of delicate balancing act so that at the end of the day, the desired outcomes that you referred to, that is us dealing with the high rates of unemployment, poverty and inequality, we're able to deal with those things. So those are ultimately the desired outcomes that we are looking for. So perhaps that's where we should start. Yes. That we in an environment where our economies, social lives have been ravaged by the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So that's a reality. How does that manifest itself? You know that we have got high rates of unemployment. We have got foreclosures of businesses. A lot of people have died, and so on and so forth. And then a lot of social stress in general, which we don't say much about it. But this COVID-19 has had that impact, social stress on all of us, so to speak. Even the way that we're doing our business. We're doing our business now, exactly. Human beings are social beings, by the fact that now we must be confined in our small offices where we have offices and so on. It's definitely, it takes a toll on all of us. But then the question is, what does one expect? The president in his State of the Nation address has given us direction as to where we must go. So all what the minister does is to try and put flesh into that skeleton that the president has set, the marching orders that he has given to all South Africans. So what is our salvation? What one is looking at here is that how do we get out of the economic stagnation, high rate of unemployment and so on, to get into a higher economic growth rates, which are inclusive, ensuring that all of us are part of that process, and all of us are part of building the economy. So the president spoke about one, that we must still defeat this pandemic, is still with us, right? So in what the minister must present, obviously must put resources into that. So we'd like to hear what he has to say about that. Indeed. Yeah.
So when we just reflect back on what the president had announced in his program of action, one of the key things that he also focused on is the concept of a capable, ethical developmental state. And I want to zone in on the issue of state capacity. That has also come up on a number of platforms, also based on research that has been done by various institutions. And it's common knowledge that South Africa is perceived as one of those countries that has the most progressive constitution and the most progressive policies as well. But the challenge of implementation has always been highlighted as a stumbling block. And the president also indicated, and he made a commitment, that this year the focus is going to be on high intensity implementation with high-level deliverables. Talk to us about how the committee is going to play its part within the broader spectrum to ensure that implementation does take place.
The taste of the pudding is in the eating. For us to be able to see that things are happening, ultimately you must see what is happening on economic growth rate, what is happening on employment figures, what is happening on poverty, and so on and so forth. I think that's ultimately. But a means to an end, in this very same speech, the President has identified the question of infrastructure spend as a way, something which is going to help us get out of this thing. So it's very important that the money that gets allocated to infrastructure gets spent. Very important. The President also spoke about the question of energy as the biggest risk.
Indeed.
Right? In everything that we are doing, you look at it economically, for business to be able to continue doing its work, there must be security of electricity. But again, households, for them to be able to do that, they need electricity. SMMEs, they need electricity. So there are initiatives that the President referred to in his speech, amongst others, allowing private sector to generate their own electricity, allowing municipalities to generate their own electricity, the opening of bid window 4 and window 5 for the IPPs. So all those things are trying to deal with the electricity deficit that is there. So that's very important that because if you talk about unemployment, you talk about poverty, if those things don't happen, we won't be able to achieve that. So from our committee, the Standing Committee on Appropriation and caucus in general, will be on a constant basis to get those reports and also to go there to say how far with the building, for instance, of Umzimvubu water scheme that was also announced by the President. You look at that, how far have we gone with the roads? Because one of the things about, if you look at the potholes that you get, one, obviously it is a problem to the users of those roads. But two, us not doing anything about that or the failure to implement programs means that people are denied jobs, and again the economy is denied of the much needed liquidity and money so that many things happen. So we'd like to see that. The President also spoke about the extension of the SRD grant, the 350 grant, that we are very happy that as we are talking about 10 million people have benefited from that grant. So it's we don't want a nation of grants, but with what has been created, people being out of jobs and no job opportunities per se, we have got a responsibility as government, in particular the African National Congress, because the poorest of the poor are the main people who elect us, to make sure that they are not left behind. Remember, the President said nobody should be left behind. Indeed. So it's our own way of bringing people on board to try and assist them in the meantime while all these other things are happening. But I think you can't talk about the SRT grant and not talk about the employment, the presidential employment stimulus, right? Where said let's go target the young people, target women, target rural communities, and they be given opportunities. If you same speech, President talked about 850,000 people have benefited from that scheme. 60% of those people are young people, 40% are women, which is a good intervention. So giving those young people an opportunity to be employed and in the process getting the much needed experience so that they can be employable after all this. But I want to talk about the 350 rand. Usually people will say, yeah, it's just consumption. Yeah, it's going to cost the state about 44 billion rand per annum to do that. So people are saying this is very expensive, but nothing can be more expensive than life. So we need to protect life. But having said that, we in economic parlance would be saying that those people have got a greater propensity to spend. Right? With the 350 rand, you are not going to to hold it and so on. We are going to spend it on meal, going to spend it in bread, and you name them.
So it goes back into the economy.
There you go. You see? So it goes back, if you look at, at the economic flow, relationship between households and firms, there's that relationship on an ongoing basis. So this 350 rand, we are having about 44 billion rand going to the economy, which is going to also to help the SMMEs and other companies to be able to go back to productivity. So that's very important. So these are things that one would expect the Minister of Finance to confirm with his budget, since the President has already announced on them. But I think it's also very important that we picking up on, because you can't talk about SON and not talk about budget and vice versa. The question of trying to get rural economies working, a number of things again. If rural areas, I don't think everybody wants to leave his home in the Eastern Cape, in KZN, and so on, and go to Johannesburg. We don't want to do that. So a need for a viable economic activity in those areas. One of the things that we really would like to see happening is the question of money going to agriculture, right? But money, it's a necessary condition, but not sufficient. You can have money, but let's also enable people to use that money properly. That goes with the whole question of the land reform process and so on, that there should be money to help those people so that they become productive. So we're expecting something from agriculture. Talking about agriculture, I can't leave this one out. The question of cannabis and hemp, right? And it's an area where our people for ages, they've been doing it, although it was illegal, but now it's being legalized, and the President promised that the regulations around that are going to be fast-tracked, so that those people who must benefit now from this industry must benefit. That goes with the removal of the red tape again. Let's make it easy. We know the market that we're dealing with. Lesotho, for instance, is far ahead of us, right? And hemp and cannabis being used for many other purposes, but there are good health reasons why we should be doing it. It's in great demand. It has got a big export market again. So we shouldn't, our people should not be left behind in that new industry. And again, it's more rural, it's more agricultural, and better employment opportunities.
Indeed.
In the budget, what's out there in the market is that the commodities have performed. So we expect higher than initially anticipated revenue. So it's very important is how do we use that revenue, because commodity prices are not permanent. Come next day, we'll be down in a trough. So when we're up there, how do we use that again? It talks again to the efficiency of spending, because of spending, and make sure that we make the best out of it.
Precisely there, Chairperson, I want to talk about the issue of, there's a growing perspective raised by quite a number of economists that governments, there's a lot of debt, that even as revenue comes in, there's a lot of very important programs that are not budgeted for because of servicing the debt. How does the committee then make sure that expenditure is the budget is allocated in such a manner that it addresses the issue of this long-term, what the long-term having this debt is going to have, the impact that it will have on the economy, and of course also making sure that the economy is able to grow and addressing the social issues as well. So a balanced approach.
Yeah. Let me say two things, right? Like me and you, when we budget in our households,
yes,
we prioritize. So there are things that you can't do, or perhaps you can't allocate same resources like when you compare to others. So priority. It's very important. Number two, there's no other way of getting out of this economic stagnation that we're in, except to get our economy again growing and growing at a faster rate. So all these things that have been identified that are going to help us grow the economy, let's be more on agriculture, what has been done, for instance, in electricity, allowing both private sector and allowing municipalities to generate their own electricity. And by the way, this parliament also, we must continue ensuring that ESCOM works, right? Because we can all of these things. If tomorrow ESCOM is not working, then there's no economy in South Africa. Let's face it. So all those things must make sure. Those are the things that are going to help us to grow the economy. The question of localization.
Indeed,
yeah,
very important.
Yeah, let's stop importing everything and we say it's cheaper, and then you're having government buying those things because it's cheaper. A myopic way of looking at it, because it may be cheaper in rand and cents, but what are we doing? We are exporting your jobs when you import, right? And you are contributing negatively to the economy. You are building other people's economy, not your economy. So we're then saying that localization also should be really, and government should lead there. The government is the biggest buyer of goods and services. So it should not be easy for government to buy things which are coming from outside when they could help local industries to grow those things, and we buy from them. Because if we do that, we're also indirectly creating jobs. But what we're also doing, we are also ensuring that there are more people who are paying taxes. We are saying your industries must also be paying taxes. Then you're having the SARS collecting more, again, then dealing with what you are talking about, the debt problem that we're having. So our salvation on this thing revolves around what we do with the economy. Anything else that we are doing, it's temporary, it's not sustainable, but we need to create sustainable industries which are going to make sure that we create sustainable employment opportunities. So I think at the end of the day, I'll say our salvation is successful implementation of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And all those elements which make that, and we need to do that.
Indeed. And talking about the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, which the President has, of course, reiterated is the key construct that will take us forward as a country. So in relation to just measuring progress, because now the President has, as I have indicated earlier, spoken about that this year is about, from now onwards, it's about implementation and deliverables. How do we ensure that the public is updated on a regular basis? These are key things. Where there are developments around localization in a particular area that the committee is doing oversight on, those are issues that must be constantly communicated, because obviously we're still in a crisis management time of our country in terms of just salvaging the economy and so forth. It becomes imperative to ensure that where there are deliverables that are being recorded, that those deliverables are also being communicated effectively. Now, talk to me a little bit about particularly the localization, which is key, because it's really about making sure that you plowing into your SMMEs in our local companies as well. And it's also not just about buying from big business, issues of monopoly. Talk to me about how do you then address the issue of monopolies and oligopolies, and how do you make sure that new entrants, come into the economy as well and also can benefit from the localization process?
That won't happen automatically. We should be deliberate about that, right? And again, I hold the view that government should lead the way by its own, not by what it says, by what it's doing. For instance, let me take a hospital somewhere in Mqanduli. It should be able to procure most of its food from the communities around Mqanduli. A community in Msinga, there's a beautiful gardens in Msinga and KZN. But I once came there, frustration, they've got no market. So we should create market for this. It's one thing to say people should produce, but create market. And I think the government should lead that. We're the biggest buyer of goods and services, right? Whether you are looking at school nutrition, whether you're looking at hospitals, whether you're looking at prisons, you name it, it's us who buy. So we need to be very deliberate to say also localizing within localizing, so to speak, right?
Indeed,
so
indeed.
take care of the people who are there at Umsinga, at Marapiane, and so on, and make sure that you buy from them. There's always a space for big business, right? But I don't think that big business and so on should find themselves. In fact, if you look at the retailers, we're also calling on them to buy from these communities. Why must we have vegetables being transported from the Johannesburg market and be taken somewhere to Mpumalanga? No. People of Mpumalanga, you can have vegetables there and so on. And the big retailers buying from them, cabbage is cabbage, beetroot is beetroot. Buy from those people, then you can always augment by buying from your big farmers and so on. That's why the president was talking about the consensus that we need to have, right? That is, what is the role that government is going to play? What is the role that labor is going to play? What is the role of business? And what's the role of civil society? And we should define our roles there. Clearly. So that all of us are measured. Are we living up to the undertakings that we are saying we're doing? So that should happen. Coming back as to, and the first people I think who must look at these things, are they happening? We should be relying on our communities themselves, because here in Parliament you may get good reports and so on and so forth. So true. But when you go to the ground, you find a completely different thing. So I think the district development model, which is trying to put the three layers of government together and focus on certain areas, must help our people to also be able to come and say, yes, we have this project, but it's not there, it's not working, it has these limitations, so that we are able to, as we go along the way, to fine-tune our processes. So that's the level that I'm talking about. But even at local government, you have got councils. They must see and not wait for 6 months before you see what's happening and so on. You understand? Indeed. On an ongoing basis, people should be reporting, we are doing this, and not just ending there, but go and see whether that is happening. Same applies with us, with all the constraints that we are having as Parliament. We should also be going and say, okay, you said this thing is happening, and at random say, let's go and see this project, so that we see it's there and so on, and also be able to track spending and efficient spending on these things that you are saying, because we have identified infrastructure. If we don't deliver on those things, right, because we are going to put in a lot of money trying to get to crowd in private sector investment in infrastructure. So we need to make sure that happens.
Indeed. So when we're talking about social employment and public employment, as the president has committed as part and parcel of ensuring that those who find themselves unemployed and unable to look after themselves, that at least those opportunities will be available. And I also want to just bring in the issue of structural reforms as well. But what I want to focus on is, how does the committee make sure that even as these infrastructure projects are rolled out across the country, they are actually rolled out in areas where there's a need, but where you also have looked at the poverty mapping situation within that particular area, so that where you roll out projects are also able to, yes, there is a social need or the infrastructure is required, but at the same time, you are also making sure that you are doing it in an area, you're bringing in infrastructure, a particular infrastructure much needed as well, in an area that will also economically or alleviate poverty in that particular area. So that kind of tracking is also critical. So instead of just saying, okay, we've got this 350 billion that the president has spoken to or committed to spend on infrastructure, where are these projects being rolled out, and are they in city centers, or are they in fact in rural areas as well, where we actually need better infrastructure?
Let's again talk about the district development model, right? Which suppose, in fact, all over the country, and you have got executives, members of the executive who have been given responsibility, who are champions of these things.
Indeed.
Yeah. And there you have got, you'll be having leaders from national parliament there. You have, national government, the national executive, and then you have got the provincial executives, and then you've got the local executives. So that ensures that at that level, remember, when we pass budget, we also pass budget for municipalities.
Absolutely.
Right? So we are saying that you need all those 3 layers of government working together, even on infrastructure. So say, we need this infrastructure here, somewhere in Bizana, in the Eastern Cape, and so on. So for that to happen, it needs both. There's a role for the local government, there's a role for provincial government, there's a role for national government. So those 3 layers of government working together, I think it's our first monitoring mechanism. That let's look at that. But having said that, yes, I then said that you don't want the concentration of these things in your urban, in your metros, and so on. I agreed. That's why if you look at the projects, when you talk about the projects, they are both urban, and as we're talking right now, and even from the president's SONA, there are both projects which are rural, and there are projects which are urban. Which are urban. Let me take one which, for me, it's very important. When we are going to use the South African National Defence Force to build bridges, build bridges in the rural areas, right? So that on its own, because we are going to be buying material from somewhere to be able to provide those bridges, so that our children in rural areas, you don't find themselves carrying their books and crossing very dangerous rivers, and a lot of these accidents happen there. So that's very rural. Agriculture, by and large, is very rural, and we are very clear that this is one sector, by the way. Agriculture has been very resilient over the years in holding our economy. Yes. You see, so it's very important that we don't forget that. You remember, you can't say I'm not going to eat today. You can say that I'm not going to buy new shoes today, but eating is something which should happen, and which happens on a daily basis. So that's why we should do that. But I think another area that, again, coming from what we are saying as the African National Congress, is the question of opening up. There's the African Continental Free Trade
Area Agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
You see, and that says let's trade amongst ourselves, right? It creates a number of, it solves a lot of problems for all of us, right? But more than anything else, why must you go and trade with the Americas and the Europes and the Chinas when you can't do it amongst ourselves? Intra-European trade, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 35, but definitely above 35% of their trade is intra-European. But with us, it's around 16%, right? So there's a big gap, and we need to do that, and we can trade with each other much cheaper. Also, that goes with infrastructure development. Absolutely. What we do at our borders, the Bait Bridge thing, right? When you find long tracks and so on, that doesn't look good for trade. We should be able to say with our brothers and sisters in the continent, how do we facilitate that so that people don't spend a lot of time, and sometimes we have got food being transported which get spoiled in the process. So what I was mentioning, I'm saying then we should also be looking at how we facilitate, and I expect the minister to say something about that. What money goes to that, so that we're able to open up that avenue.
As we conclude, Ndade Buthelezi, I just want to zone in on the issue of structural reforms. How does the committee then ensure that with all the structural reforms that are being put in place as committed to by the president, that also focuses on giving access, particularly to women and youth, who are mostly negatively affected by poverty and unemployment in the country? So structural reforms, it's good and well that there's a process underway, and I mean it's a commendable commitment, and it's required for where we are right now. But it must also be targeted at specific beneficiaries, and that is, we're talking about young people and we're talking about the women of this country. How does the committee bring in a gender perspective when it comes to all of these economic activities? As you conclude, please, sir.
Yeah, let me say it's the responsibility, if you want to get oversight of Parliament in general. As you know, that the Money Bills Act give us certain things to do, but as Parliament working in unison, we have got that responsibility. But it goes down to the laws that we set. I think if you look at most regulations, we've been very clear that women and the young people should be preferred when it comes to procurement. But that's government. But we also like the private sector to be doing that. Right? Yeah, it's not an either or situation. Let's all do that if we are serious about this thing, because we know the impact of especially women being dependent on men. What it is we're talking. If you look at GPV, you find that by and large it's very economic dependent, and people think that they've earned the right to abuse women. You see, so it's very important that we also empower them. The young people. It's also very important. The unemployment figures are too great. So again, to prioritize them. But I think I must say this one. The presidential employment stimulus has mainly focused on the young people and focused on women. So we are leading the way. But all this economic recovery thing, you must know that there are big risks happening out there.
Indeed.
As to how the world economy performs. If it performs better, then we can export more. Again, we should also be very much aware of some of the pressure points. For instance, what is developing between Russia, Ukraine, and the US and Western Europe generally. We don't want a war when we are busy with another war, which is a war against COVID, as it were.
Absolutely.
So everybody must just tread carefully. We don't want to be plunged into another war now. We have got to focus on the war against COVID-19
Absolutely.
pandemic.
Thank you very much. I want to just thank you sincerely, Ntate Buthelezi, for making the time before the Minister of Finance delivers his budget speech this afternoon. Thank you very much for the insight shared, and we hope to have you again with us. That is all we have time for this afternoon. That was the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, Ntate Fiscal Buthelezi, who was sharing with us his insights and what to expect from the Minister's budget speech a little bit later this afternoon. Do stay tuned.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
On Tuesday, the 1st of June 2021, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Nimudise, and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, will table Parliament's budget vote in the National Assembly and the NCOP respectively at 2 p.m. Parliament's budget vote seeks to outline the funding of the Oversight, Lawmaking, Public Involvement and International Relations Program and provide account of the previous spending of the allocated budget. Watch the live build-up program on the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces debates on Vote 2 on Parliament TV from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. and across Parliament's social media platforms. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
16 Lotoli Art Gallery is an art gallery run by Tulani Fesi Bilo. It's an arts and culture art gallery which displays arts from legends from Gwalanga, like your Mongesi Kum, your Gerald Tabeta, and also a young artist, emerging artist called Tulumanofeni. So it's an art gallery that houses our local artists, and it embraces the art of Langa and also embraces Langa as an art destination. For us, being in a tourism district, we are usually affected by COVID, obviously based on the closures and the non-travel that has occurred in the society, and also with us having to rely on tourism as well as locals who are jobless. Now we couldn't even get our locals to come and support our businesses. So we've had a huge impact. I think now, since the borders are being slowly opened, we've seen the difference now. It's becoming more positive, and we've been able to grow a bit. I think for us, since the inception of this program, we personally haven't relied on any outside funding. It's all been public sponsorships and other huge private funders who are able to assist us. I think for now, for us as small business owners, what we would expect at least is a plan where our black enterprises stop being called small businesses, and how do we move from small businesses to having large enterprises. I think that's the plan that we are looking for as the youth of KwaLanga, and this is what we would love to hear from the minister.
South Africa is facing an economic and financial crisis. The economy is not growing, there's unemployment at an all-time high, and government spending is more than its income and its revenue, and government's debt is ever increasing, and the cost to service that debt is unaffordable. The minister will have to take a firm stance against the inflated public wage bill. He will have to introduce actual measures to curb the wage bill, not just a lot of words, but actual action. He will also need to introduce measures to create a conducive environment for the private sector to create jobs and get the economy going. That will include tax relief and definitely no increases in any form of taxes or tariffs. That will be detrimental to the economy. It will not stimulate growth, and it will not stimulate job creation. We will have a dire effect if there's any increases in personal income tax or company tax, as it will have the opposite effect, and it will not create jobs and job creation and economic growth. We need measures and structural reforms. He will have to reaffirm what the president also said during the State of the Nation address, and he will have to give action to that. He will have to introduce measures to create that conducive environment.
The budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
We have given ourselves 100 days to finalize what I call a comprehensive social compact, to grow our economy, to create jobs, and to combat hunger. This work will build on the foundation of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, which we adopted, which remains our common program to rebuild the economy. We remain focused on the priorities we identified in the State of the Nation last year, they being overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic, a massive rollout of infrastructure, a substantial increase in local production, and employment stimulus to create jobs and support livelihoods, and the rapid expansion of our energy generation capacity. To be effective, this social compact needs to include every South African and every part of our society. In the end, we must all be imbued with the understanding that no one must be left behind.
On Tuesday, the 1st of June 2021, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Nimodise, and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, will table Parliament's budget vote in the National Assembly and the NCOP respectively at 2 p.m. Parliament's budget vote seeks to outline the funding of the Oversight, Lawmaking, Public Involvement and International Relations Program and provide account of the previous spending of the allocated budget. Watch the live build-up program on the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces debates on Vote 2 on Parliament TV from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. and across Parliament's social media platforms. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
It's a rooibos that is made from a fine boss rooibos plants, which is sourced locally in South Africa, and I'm working very closely with Cape Natural Tea Products. So I go once a month to create my very special blend, and these are the headquarters, man, where the magic takes place into packing it into these beautiful packages. We're not only job creators, we're people on the ground, so we know people's needs, and I think we are the main backbones of any economy, so we can grow. So what I'm expecting from the Minister of Finance is not only to say there's 2 billion allocated to SMEs. There should also be marketing and enable a bit of easy access, because we're sitting here, we have to go through a lot of documents, bureaucratic language that some of us do not even understand. So if it can be simplified in a manner that even the person who's buying meat out there can be registered and maybe get funding, then with those that's what I'm I'm expecting. We're also expecting measures in which the state can work with small businesses to say, okay, in our offices we buy tea from Parliament teas. So how about we buy tea from Mavusana? Maybe 0.5% of our tea will be coming from Mavusana, and then in that way we will be able to accelerate development. I mean, we get a lot of people from all over the country saying, hey, I'm in Northwest, how can I get it? Hey, I have a lodge in Limpopo, how can I get it? So there's traveling that is needed, there's a distributor that we need that side, so it's quite a lot. So if there is a funding, we will be able to centralize everything, and then we can push one way. Based on what the president said about the SMEs, it is vital to support small upcoming businesses because they are the backbone of any other economy. I also didn't hear like quite a lot of measures. How are they going to undertake? Because what is actually needed by the SMEs is more of a support than anything else. To say, okay, let us, as government, let us assist in a manner that we will allow you to supply us, or we will allow you to align with Department of Trade so you can trade. And what I'm expecting from the Minister of Finance is how are they going to allocate funds into marketing so that the funds can be easily accessible. You know, just like any brochure of any business that you can easily find. So that is what I'm expecting to say, okay, if you have this kind of business, you need government assistance, these are the channels to follow. They just need to be simply out there for everyone to easily access them, even if someone is buying their meat for chisanyama or whatever the reason may be.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Welcome back. You're still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. Today is Budget Day. The Minister of Finance will deliver the budget speech at a hybrid sitting of the National Assembly a little bit later, or just we're minutes away from it at 2 p.m. The President's State of the Nation address, which he delivered on the 10th of February 2022, provided the blueprint for government's program of action for the next financial year. But importantly, the President indicated that he would not be announcing new priorities, but instead he reiterated that the 4 priorities that were announced in his 2021 State of the Nation address remain relevant for the current financial year. Another important point that was reiterated by the President is the fact that government is not solely responsible for creating jobs, but rather is responsible for creating a conducive environment for business to create jobs. But government will, however, create public and social employment opportunities for poverty alleviation purposes. To take this conversation further, I am now joined by the chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission, Mayor Patience Mbava. Mayor Mbava, thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here.
Wonderful. I am also joined via Zoom platform by Ms. Koliswa Malindini, who is a lecturer and an economist in her own right from the Wits School of Governance. Ms. Malindini, thank you so much for making the time to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Just by way of introducing or starting off this conversation, this very important conversation, as we anticipate the Minister's budget speech a little bit later. In fact, we're 25 minutes away from the Minister's budget speech. Talk to us just a little bit about the importance of macroeconomic policy, given the current context that we're finding ourselves in as a country, and how can we use macroeconomic policy to ensure that we reposition the country for growth. And I think I want to start with you, Ma'am Mbava. Just talk to us briefly about that, just as your opening remarks.
So thank you so much. So if we remember the medium-term budget policy statement, budget 2021, as well as the latest SONA, the key themes which came out of that is that government wants to balance economic and social recovery, as well as ensure that there is financial sustainability in terms of our public finances. Now, what has happened is that since January 2022, our risk profile has changed quite a bit because we have also added in additional debt to our fiscal framework. So we have an 11 billion loan from the World Bank, which is payable over 13 years with an additional 3 years grace period. So basically it means that currently now as we stand, that for each 1 rand that government receives as revenue, 21 cents is actually used to pay interest on the debt. So from a fiscal perspective, it is very critical that we maintain a strong balance in terms of our revenue and our spending.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that we might have to do some belt tightening going forward because now there's additional debt that we have acquired, even though government has told us that the additional debt since we acquired in January is at concessional levels. Still, it is actually debt basically in our books. So it means that basic services such as access to water, to housing and the social grant system, those still need to be paid.
Indeed.
And we know that inflation has also gone up. So the real value right now of the social grants, especially the old age social grants and the child support social grant, the real value has actually been eroded by inflation. So government has to consider actually adjusting those to be in line with the inflation.
Indeed. Perhaps let's bring in Ms. Malindini quickly. What are your views in relation to all of the key issues that have been raised by Dr. Mbaba? Your take, please.
Thank you so much. These are key issues that you just raised, and I think they require much consideration as we look forward to the taping of this budget speech, because those they touch mostly on the socio-economic issues that we are currently grappling with. Our economic growth is declining. Our debt to GDP ratio is rising. We still have these socio-economic challenges that we're grappling with, and so I think these are key issues that we really looking forward to our minister addressing in this budget. So, yeah, these are key issues that I think need to be addressed.
Indeed. But let's come back to the FFC's submission, the 2022-23 submission, which is divided into 4 parts. But I want to specifically focus on Dr. Mbaba on how the pandemic has impacted finances at local government level. Talk to us a little bit about what the FFC's analysis has been and what are the kind of interventions that can be put in place to ensure that the budget that is available will actually be utilized to provide services to those who are in dire need of those services at the local sphere.
So as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually brought shocks to the economy. And because of those shocks, government had to actually widen the social net to ensure that those who are actually experiencing hardship are actually accommodated. So what has happened is that we have had to pay over the social relief grant to many of our people, and also at social grant level, we have more social grant recipients now than before. Mm-hmm. So it means that our budgets actually have gone up in terms of the social protection, right? That's where most of our money is going into. And at local government level, it means that the problem now is that with the intergovernmental fiscal framework, where we actually allocate budget across the 3 spheres of government, the money that is available now to allocate to local government, provincial government, and national government might be, reduced, or we might experience some sort of expenditure items which will not be catered for. Indeed. So it's very important that at local government, at municipal level, there are more operational efficiencies because the pie is getting smaller. So what do we mean by operational efficiencies? The amounts which have been allocated needs to be used exactly for what they have been allocated for.
Absolutely.
For instance, we have conditional grants, which are allocated to municipalities and to at local government level for specific reasons. Many times, those conditional grants are misused or used for other things. We also need to ensure that basic services such as water, access to sanitation, those are provided for by local government because those are constitutionally mandated. Those are socio-economic rights. So if the municipalities are unable to provide those services, then we are going to see a retrogression in terms of our socio-economic rights. So it's very, very important that the local government level delivers, because that is the cold face of service delivery.
Absolutely. Ms. Malindini, if I can just get your perspectives around this very interesting paper that you've written, where you postulate the view that the quality of institutions within a country actually is a key determinant of whether the country will be able to accelerate growth, inclusive growth. Talk to us a little bit more about that paradigm shift from just focusing on the macroeconomic determinants of inclusive growth or growth in general to the governance aspects as key determinants.
So basically what the paper is about, it is looking at the effect of institutional capacity, institutional quality on economic performance. So basically what it says is there's been this paradigm shift in terms of looking at economic performance, and in particular the foreign direct investments in that paper, which looks at what actually are the determinants of foreign direct investment into an economy, right? So there has been this paradigm shift which states that previously the focus has always been on the microeconomic variables or factors like your inflation, your trade openness, the market size, and many other factors that foreign investors may take into account when they decide to invest in a particular location, right? But recently there has been these debates that apart from the macroeconomic factors, institutional quality plays a key role in terms of determining whether or not a country attracts FDI, right? So in this case, the quality of institutions, it plays a key role in the sense that the institutions within the recipient country where we expect foreign direct investments to flow, the environment has to be conducive to foreign investors. That is, the cost of doing business should be low. We should create that environment which the foreign investors find conducive. And in my view, not only for foreign direct investors, but also for domestic investors as well, because I think when you look at our economy, that is the South African economy, we can see that not only foreign direct investments have declined in the recent years, but also we've seen domestic investments decline as well, which means that we have to create that conducive environment, which is corruption-free, where the transaction cost, that is the cost of doing business, are not as high. And I think that touches also to the issue that the president raised during his final presentation, where he actually stated that the role of the state is to create, or is not to create jobs, but rather to create a conducive environment.
Absolutely.
So he touched on removing the red tape, for instance, in the economy, which I think is part of building or that is working towards good institutional quality, where we ensure that the investors in our country feel safe, and not only foreign investors, but even domestic investors feel safe so that they can invest, because I think we've seen that our gross fiscal capital formation has also been on the decline. So that's one of the key issues that I think we need to pay attention to as we do this. That is, not only do we need to focus on attracting foreign direct investors, but we also need to make sure that we stimulate our economy locally or domestically. That is the issues that he raised about removing the red tape, the loans that are made available, the funds through the development finance institutions.
Right.
So those are some of the things that I think are a step towards achieving that good institutional quality in our country, which will then feed into better economic performance, or that would be a good recovery strategy for us as a country. So that's basically what the paper is about. It's mainly focusing on institutional culture, which is basically how the rules are enforced in the country, because you find that, for instance, in some institutions, quality is weak because there are rules in place, but then the rules are not being enforced as they should. And therefore, it doesn't serve any purpose to have them on paper and they're not being implemented. So those are some of the issues
Absolutely.
I think our government needs to look into to ensure that we create that conducive environment so that, for instance, we can ensure that the property rights of those investors are protected for them to feel free and safe to invest in this environment. So that's basically what the paper is all about. The institutional quality, we need to work on that and make sure that the environment is conducive for the private sector to invest, and that, I think, would also assist in terms of avoiding capital flight.
You also talk about the interface between, you categorize the various kind of like institutions that must interface with one another in order to be able to, when they work together, they should be able to make sure that you are driving, that the economy grows. Talk to us a little bit more about, particularly in relation to the issue of state capacity, because we know the Minister of Finance will be making the announcement as to how money will be spent, but it's not just about expenditure. It is about the capacity to do so. And if the state is not aware of where exactly it should target its capacity building interventions, it becomes a bit difficult. So talk to us very briefly about what are the institutions that we should be looking at that are functional and that are required to actually push the country forward within that macroeconomic space, very briefly.
So in this case, we're looking at different institutions. For instance, we have the political institutions, which I think play a key role as far as the quality, the institutional quality is concerned in a country. So we talk about political institutions where the laws and regulations are actually rectified, which is actually in Parliament, by the way. So we then have these laws and regulations ratified, and therefore the laws, the policies that get ratified at the parliamentary level, they need to then be implemented, right?
Indeed.
So in this case, we're expecting our minister to table this budget, but then the key thing, apart from the funds that will be allocated, but the important thing there is how then how does Parliament go about implementing those, and that speaks directly to the institutional capacity. For instance, we talk about the loan guarantees that the president touched on during his presentation. So we have those, and then we have to then bring in the financial institutions within our economy. Are they able to provide such services? Have they been fully capacitated, for instance, to provide such services? And on the other hand, we are implementing these and say, if we say, for instance, we need to make funds available and accessible, particularly to the small businesses in the country, if we are to stimulate our economy and make sure that we recover soon. So the other problem then, or the other issue then would be when such funds are allocated, for instance, to stimulate and to give access to those small businesses, how are they capacitated so that they're able to use those funds? Because I think we've seen cases where funds are being allocated to small businesses, or not only to small businesses, to some departments as well, where funds are allocated, but then funds are there, but there is no proper capacity building exercise that takes place before those funds are actually spent, to ensure that by the time they get spent, they actually know where to spend those funds and how to spend them. So my colleague here touched on the issue of efficiency. And I think efficiencies should not only be at the local sphere of government. Efficiency should start also from the national sphere of government, where we ensure that the manner in which the funds are allocated, it is such that the institutions or the departments that are being allocated such funds are able to implement and ensure that the funds are efficiently utilized. So in this case, the issue of capacity becomes key, because we have funds, but if there's no capacity for us to do such things, then it really doesn't serve any purpose. So my issue here, for instance, would be to make sure that when allocating those funds, we allocate funds and then ensure that there is some sort of skills development, if I can put it that way, skills development, where people are actually able to acquire the skills so that they're able to make efficient use of whatever funds they're allocated with. Otherwise, it becomes a cycle where funds are allocated, then we don't care how they are spent, but as long as they are
Absolutely.
They are allocated. And another issue here, which I think speaks directly to capacity building as well, is those who have to play an oversight role, particularly when it comes to financial oversight and accountability. I think there also has to be sort of a capacity building that takes place so that they know where or what to look for when they are actually exercising, their role of playing an oversight and accountability role. So institutional capacity is very important, because I think we can allocate funds as perfectly as the minister can, but if there is no capacity building in terms of how those funds should be efficiently utilized to ensure that there are priorities that are being, considered when the funds are spent, that becomes key. And if there's no capacity building, then I don't think we are anywhere in terms of
Indeed.
achieving what we want to achieve.
I think I want to quickly bring in Dr. Mbaba quickly, because that's precisely one of the key issues that the FFC submission focuses on, is the issue of oversight, accountability and leadership. Talk to us about how then the FFC gives guidance in relation to ensuring that over and above, yes, I mean, that is obviously a key pressure point, that oversight and accountability needs to be effected, and Parliament needs to be more effective in terms of how it exercises, especially budget oversight, to ensure that money is being spent. But talk to us, what is the main thrust in the FFC submission around issues of oversight, accountability and leadership, especially when we link it in with the issue of state capacity?
So in one of our submissions, we have made it quite clear that government needs to stem the leakages, for instance, that are endemic in the public sector. That demands leadership from government. So far we have had the SIU report on the COVID-19 pandemic, and
Yes.
we have two reports now from the Zondo Commission. So we need to see action so that we can be able to hold those who are accountable. The problem is that whilst the government has these goals, these twin goals that I've mentioned initially, of achieving social and economic recovery, as well as achieving fiscal sustainability, the progress thereof is going to be quite slow if we still have, leakages in the system. So we need to stem those leakages in the system.
So how can the if I may just interject quickly, what kind of systemic interventions can be put in place? Because these are issues that have been discussed on the parliamentary platform, I suppose. I mean, these are discussions that are ongoing discussions. So talk to us about what kind of practical things can be done. This is not a normal scenario. We're finding ourselves having to deal with the far-reaching impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy. So the way money is being spent, the way money is being utilized becomes key. So what kind of systemic changes can the FFC recommend for Parliament to put in place, and of course for government as well, to ensure that systemically speaking, and we know that the AG's office is also there, but they only actually come into the process after money has been spent. So talk to us about the kind of interventions that will assist in terms of ensuring that when money is being allocated, and to prevent this endemic issue that you're talking to, fiscal leakages.
So we know that we have the PFMA, which is quite clear on the responsibilities of accounting officers in terms of how they need to have stewardship over public resources.
Right.
So what we've seen is that there has been lack of consequence management, in terms of holding those who are responsible accountable. And then from an oversight perspective, Parliament is there to ensure that the monies which have been allocated are spent accordingly, and that monies are either, if they are not spent, we've seen some are even sent back to the fiscus, which is quite sad, because it means that there is no capacity, as my colleague said, to actually spend the money. So we need to ensure that we allocate budgets with a 3-year view, to know that those budgets are going to be spent properly, and that there is capacity within the institutions to spend those funds. So as the FFC, what we have advocated for is that there needs to be accountability from all stakeholders. We need to ensure that those who are accountable actually lead effectively and ensure that they have proper stewardship over public resources.
Absolutely.
And that is where the problem is. There is a lack of consequence management. We have reports out there that are holding people accountable, but we haven't seen any action as yet.
Indeed. Unfortunately, Dr. Mbava and Ms. Malindini, that's where we have to leave it for now. I do want to thank you so much and sincerely for making the time to be with us this afternoon. There will be more opportunities for us to further unpack, particularly the issue of state capacity, which has also been highlighted by the President as key, in ensuring that the economic reconstruction and recovery plan as a whole finds expression on the ground. With that said, I want to thank you so much. Well, that's all we have time for this afternoon. We are literally minutes away from 1400 hours when the Minister of Finance will be delivering his maiden budget speech. So for more on that, do stay tuned.
The Queen has 3 units. There's nails, there's beauty, and there's helps. So currently, I only have 3 people that are helping me. And prior to COVID, I had about 26 people that I had hired. So, but I had to cut down. So with the enough funds, I can rehire and hire new faces as well. What got highlighted to me from the President's address was that he will be introducing the bounce back scheme. I was very thrilled to hear about this bounce back scheme because indeed it is going to give us an opportunity to bounce back, because as since the COVID-19 we have really suffered as formal and informal businesses. Now, what I'm hoping to hear from the Minister of Finance is how they will ease on how to get some access to these funds, because there's so many things that need to go into it, like there's paperwork, there's registrations, and so you'd find that there are funds, but I don't qualify for them, or funds have run out. And just when I had just qualified, but then they've run out. So I'm hoping that there will be enough funds, and they will ease on how to get access to these funds.
You are still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. And today is Budget Day, as the Minister of Finance will deliver the budget speech at a hybrid sitting of the National Assembly at 2 p.m. I have with me Mr. Edward Njanu, a committee member of the Select Committee on Finance. Good afternoon, Mr. Njadu, and welcome to Parliament TV.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to all the viewers.
Mr. Njadu, if you can briefly share the role of the Select Committee on Finance in the NCOP, and if, as you do that, if you could align it with the role that this committee plays in the budget process.
The National Council of Provinces, its mandate is to mostly working with provinces, representing provinces, and then also to work closely with national government and also with municipalities. And the role of the committee is to, especially when we speak on the appropriations mostly, is to look in terms of oversight over municipalities and over the provinces and also the state-owned entities.
And how does this committee make sure that the public participation is prioritized?
Yeah, public participation is a very important aspect for the committee, which was hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a priority in making sure that the public have got access to the work of the committee. So as the committee, we are having immediately after the budget speech, we are engaging with public hearings with the communities, whereby we're engaging in terms of communities to bring submissions to the committee.
So when these submissions are made, they clearly make it to the reports of the committee as some form of recommendation. Now, what is the role that the committee plays to ensure that these recommendations are implemented?
Yeah, the role of the committee is to, in consultation with FFC and also in consultation with the PPO, when we are doing public hearings, is to receive all submissions, which submissions are in verbal submissions, some submissions are in writing, that we then consolidate all those submissions, and then we put it into the report of the committee, which is then taken to the House. When the report is taken for endorsement to the House, and then that submissions is then becoming under consideration for those submissions to be processed.
Mr. Njadu, lastly, if you could just briefly talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the work of the committee. We need to go to the chamber as the Minister of Finance is preparing to deliver the address. If you can briefly, just on the impact of COVID-19.
On the impact of COVID-19, it was the situation that the committee could not go out to do public hearings. And then we had to do the public hearings visual. And that was the impact of the COVID-19. But the committee, public is being invited to the committee to come and do their public hearings on site with the committee. So the impact of COVID-19 was that we could not go out to the public.
Mr. Njadu, thank you very much for talking to Parliament TV. It's really appreciated. Viewers, that was Mr. Njadu, the member of the Select Committee on Finance. We are on a build-up to the Minister of Finance budget speech, and we will be taking you back. We will be taking you to the chamber as the preparations are underway.
Thank you very much, and we also congratulate the new minister.
The President did say a number of things that we liked to hear. And specifically, he said that it is business that will create jobs in South Africa and not government. So what we would be looking for in the budget is we want to be hearing the...
You may be seated.